All right, so in this video, we're going to go over some of the general things you might do with a single variable. So we're going to go through mean, median, and mode, and also go through how to find the minimum, quartile 1, quartile 2, which is also equal to the median, quartile 3, the maximum. And we're going to use some of those values to create a candlestick or box and whisker plot. We'll go into a histogram and a pie chart at the end. So if you look at the bottom of this video, there will be some timestamps for whenever we get to each of those different graphs if you are interested in only looking at one of those graphs. We're going to look at a pretty large data set here. We're going to pretend that there's about 55 students or so, and they all have a grade out of 100. So here we go. We're going to use some of the built-in specialized functions in the spreadsheet to calculate things like the average, the median, and the mode to make things easier, because I don't want to rearrange this data set to order it. Although you could do that, it would just get a little bit more time consuming. So we're going to start with the mean. So the specialized function that goes with that is called the average. So I'm going to start this cell with an equal sign, and we'll type in average. So there is usually some autocomplete text that shows up when you start typing. You can use that if you'd like, if you just want to type it in and then open up a bracket. Now it's looking for the data that we are going for. So I'm going to highlight all of the marks. I'm not going to worry about the student IDs for this one. These are single variable graphs, so I will only be highlighting one column. So we're taking the average of all these things here, and this function will just calculate it already for me. So the mean grade here was 75% or so. We don't have to divide by 55 because that's all just kind of built into the average function. Now, if we do the median, there is another one called median. So we just press equals again because we're going to do a calculation inside of the cell. Press median, open the bracket. So now it's looking for the data set. So I'm going to, again, highlight this. Close the bracket. And we got a median of 75 as well. Now the last one for mode, you might be able to guess that there's a function called mode. So equals mode, open the bracket, highlight the data set. These are all measures of what's called central tendency to try to get like what's the middle of this data set. They just all have their own approaches. Sometimes they'll agree, sometimes they won't. So we're getting a mode here of 96.61. So there's maybe some decimal places being hidden here. So I'm just going to decrease the decimal places. So it looks like maybe 97. So it looks like we've got a pretty big difference here, is that the most popular grade was actually a 97. So that's quite a bit different from the average grade being 75 and the median. If you were to order them all and then pick the middle, the median was 75. So that's just interesting there. There's a big group that's kind of gotten 97. So we're using the built-in spreadsheet functions there. Now we'll just continue on with minimum all the way to maximum here. And again, each of these has their own specialized functions. So we'll say equals min is the thing we want here. And again, we're going to highlight this data set all the way to 55. And we get the minimum was a 0, and that last grade here was actually a 0. As you're analyzing, especially like your data set, you might need to consider if there were any outliers. This would be a potential for an outlier. Like, why did this person get it a 0? Is it because they wrote every test and just got a 0, or like did every assignment but literally got 0? Or did they just like not participate from the start? If, depending on the situation, this could be a data point that you might actually want to take out of your data set. And you might have some of those as well. If you were tracking a particular activity or you had a purpose to your data, if you found you had a data point or two that didn't actually align with that purpose overall, you might want to pull that out of your data set. But that's a different conversation. So we'll keep going with quartile 1. So Q1 to Q3, we can use the quartile function. So it's equals quartile, and then we highlight everything again. Close the bracket. There we go. So the first quartile is saying NA. Oh, I didn't put everything in. So with the quartile, you have to put a second argument in. So after it's tempting just to close the bracket because we do that a lot, but we actually need to put a second thing in here. Which quartile did we want? 1, 2, or 3, or 4? We wanted quartile 1. So there we go. And I'll just decrease the number of decimal places shown there so it matches more with the data. And I'm using this data set a lot, so I'm actually going to do an extra little trick. I'm just going to highlight everything here. You don't have to do this, but it can make things a little bit easier. So I'm going to highlight this, and now in this top box here, it's showing up as name box. I can actually give it a special name. I'm going to call it grades. So now when I do the next one, I don't have to highlight anymore. So watch this. So equals quartile again. What is the data set? I want it to do grades. So once I type in grades, it remembered that I named that set. So that's just a little bit more convenient. I want quartile 2. I don't really need to find this one because it should be the median. 75. And decrease the decimal places. So we do get the exact same median out here. Okay, so median, quartile 2. I'm just doing that so that you have an opportunity to recognize those are the same things. But quartile 3, we do need to find, so we'll get quartile, and I'll again put in grades. We're looking for quartile 3, so comma 3, and we get 89. Again, we'll just match the no decimal places, and we'll find the maximum. Equals maximum of grades, close the bracket, and there we go. So now we've got everything in here, and we didn't have to worry about ordering this data set, which you can sort in a spreadsheet. But if you have more than one variable attached or more than one column, ordering your data set can kind of mix things up. So being able to use these specialized spreadsheet functions is quicker and maybe more accurate because you might make a mistake with a larger data set. So let's find the interquartile range. So that's defined as kind of the middle 50% of the data. So it's going to be equal to whatever your quartile 3 value is minus quartile 1. So we're going to press equals to do some math. Click on the cell for quartile 3 minus then quartile 1. So the interquartile range here, which is a measurement of like how spread up or apart your data is, it's 23 here. Now, if we look at the full range, this is the max minus the min. So this one here ends up giving us a full range of 97. So the middle 50% of the data is within 23 points, or 23%, but then the full range is all the way from 0 to 97%. And that's another reason why, that 0, you might want to consider, is that an outlier? Because now our range just looks really big, but there is only that one person who got the 0. If we took out that 0, what would our data set look more consistent? Maybe. Okay, so now we're ready to put this stuff into a box and whisker or candlestick chart. So as we went over in class, the language for when the whisker kind of ends and when the box starts to open and close, these are minimum, quartile 1, quartile 3, and maximum. But on a candlestick plot, Google Sheets or your spreadsheet software uses different words. So they use low for minimum, open for quartile 1, that's when the box opens, close for quartile 3, where the box closes, and then high instead of maximum. So I'm just going to click these in. So low is the minimum, open is at quartile 1, close is at quartile 3. So I'm pressing equals before each one, and I'm clicking on the cell that has the information. You could type it in as well, but it's nice when everything is linked. So if, for example, if I wanted to decide I wanted to take out that last data point, if I change this to like 50, that automatically gets updated everywhere else I used this cell. I'm going to leave it there for now, but we'll just see how it goes. So now when we're making our box and whisker plot or candlestick plot, I'm going to highlight everything here. So I highlight all of these 4 keywords, low, open, close, and high, because that's going to help the spreadsheet know which graph I want to use, or when I select candlestick, it'll know what the numbers mean. And then this grade with percent is going to show up as the title on the bottom. So to put in any sort of chart, you have to go to Insert, then Chart. And by default, it might give us what we want. In this case, it did. But if it showed up with like a column chart like this, you're like, oh, I wanted a box and whisker plot or a candlestick plot. You just have to go into chart type and look for the one you want. Candlestick was right at the top, but if it wasn't right at the top, it will show up somewhere over here. So candlestick chart. So now we can see what's here. You should, change the default titles, low, open, close, and high. That's not a descriptive title, so that should be changed. But that'll be up to you to change that. You can see grade and percent is showing up on that axis there. And although maybe it should show up on the left part of the axis. So make sure that your graph makes sense. And there's another title down here, which again, you should always change the default titles. Don't just submit it as it is. Make sure your graphs make sense. So we've got the box and whisker plot, and hovering over it, we can see what some of those values were. And we can see that huge kind of long whisker that goes all the way to 0 here. Again, that might be distorting the data. So maybe a reason to take that 0 out. What is noticeably different between the candlestick chart is that it's vertical instead of sideways. So I'm just going to resize that. And I'll just put it underneath here. Okay, so that is just how to get the candlestick chart going, but I am intentionally not retitling things because those are choices you should make and look into them. So now let's get into the histogram, which was next. I guess I need to resize this a bit more. So there we go. So for the histogram, we don't actually need to calculate anything different. We can go right away just from the data set. So if I just highlight, or I think I can actually just say, I want grades, it'll select it for me rather than dragging. Then I'm just going to insert another chart. So I want to find a histogram. So I'm going to insert chart, and it might bring up a histogram. It actually did, but that doesn't always happen. Charts and spreadsheets are kind of annoying sometimes. They can be really specific and you get these weird errors. So I'm just going to pretend, for example, it gave me let's say it gave me a line chart. I would want to then click into the chart type and look for the histogram, which looks like a bar graph, but don't select like a regular column chart. We're looking for histogram. So make sure when you hover over it, it says histogram. So that's this one here. So it will do a pretty good job by default. So it'll make your variable on the bottom, which is continuous. So this is the grades. So like maybe you could do something like that to change the title. This title is not descriptive. You should change that. The spreadsheet will try and do the best default job it can. So you can see we have a lot of students. There's about 17 in each of these kind of ranges from 57 to 71, about 17 in there. About another 16 or so maybe got in between a 71 and an 85. And then another 17 or so got between 85 and 100. If that is too many bars for you, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bins for our histogram, or 7 bars. If you don't like what it did by default, you can go into the Customize tab on the side. Just go to the histogram side, and you can actually change the bucket size. So what if we just wanted to do, for example, 100 is easily divisible by 20. That'll give us 5 ranges. We could just type in 20 here, and that will give us 5 bars. And then you can see that there's actually, there's about 30 people that got between 60 and 80, another big clump between 80 and 100. There's always going to be, with this data set, a blank, because that 0 again is kind of out there. It's an outlier. Maybe it's still part of the data set because this person tried, maybe not because they were just someone that never started the course. But that's something to consider with your data set. It depends on what you're trying to communicate. There's more than one good answer a lot of the times with a chart. You just want to make sure that you are happy with how it looks. Your titles are descriptive. You've got the number of bars that you want. If we did like 4 bars, that just doesn't really look quite as descriptive enough. Like, I think 5 bars just looked a bit nicer. We could try, maybe you could try something like 6 bars if you wanted to, if you did 100 divided by 6. Auto does a pretty good job. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bars here. You might be happy with the way that displays. But we'll shrink this one down and we'll get into the space for a pie chart next. Okay, so for the pie chart, we're actually going to do something by hand that the histogram did for us. The histogram created these bins for us, and that's because histograms are quite popular. Okay, so there's just extra built-in functionality for a histogram than there are for other charts. So for the pie chart, we're gonna actually create our own bins. So I'm gonna do a bin width. I'm actually gonna use the 20 that we had before that gave us 5 bins. So I'm going to go ahead and do 0 to 20 is 1 bin, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 100. Okay, so the bin width is 20. I'm just going to leave a little bit of space here. So the question you might be asking now is we're trying to count the frequency here. How often do these show up? And this is a bigger data set. If we only had like 20 points, you could just count how many fall in and type in the number. But that's going to take a lot of work just to go through and be like, okay, how many go in there? So you can use, again, some specialized functions. We're going to use the count if function. So this is advanced territory now. Not that you can't understand it, but a box and whisker plot and a histogram are easier to do, and they're a really good choice for displaying data. But we're going to count if the cells here are in between 0 and 20. So we're going to use count if. It's asking for the range. So I am looking to count grades, put a comma in. What's the criteria? We're going to say it is less than 20. Let's see if that works. Got an error. So might need some quotation marks. Does that work? Okay, there we go. Okay, so now when we do the next one, this is actually going to be a little bit trickier because we can't do kind of 2 conditions at once. Again, this is into more advanced territory, but some of you might be into this. So we're going to do again, count if. Our range is again grades. And our condition now is going to be less than 40. So that's going to pick up the ones that were less than 20 as well, right? So we're actually going to do a subtraction. We're going to do minus count if, and we're going to do the same condition as above, less than 20. So we're counting all the ones less than 40, but then subtracting off the ones that are less than 20. So that's giving us 0. And that matches, I think, what we did with the histogram above. We had that one that had 0 in it. So I'm just going to copy and paste some of this text here, because when we do 40 and 60, most of this structure is still going to be good. But we want to count things that are less than 60 and subtract off things that are less than 40. Now we have 4 in that boat, or in that bin. Now we're going to do between 60 and 80, so count all the ones that are less than 80 and subtract off the ones that are less than 60. And last one here, count all the things that are less than, or now we can just actually do one single one. We just want to count any grades that are greater than 80, and probably greater than or equal to. Quotation marks, there we go, 19. So I just want to make sure I had 55 students. I'm just gonna sum up to make sure I have all of them. So I'm gonna count these ones up here. 54, we missed one somewhere. All right, so we only got 54 there, but we only started counting students at row 2. So that means we subtract 1. So we've got all of our students there. We've got all 54. Okay, so the idea here, I'm just gonna delete that now. Now that we have these bins, we're gonna make a pie chart with these bins. So I'm going to highlight these ones, and I'm gonna insert another chart. So insert chart. And we were lucky enough, the 3 out of 3, to get the right chart we wanted to, but that isn't necessarily gonna happen for you. So again, if you didn't get the chart you want, then you want to find it somewhere. You could change the way the pie chart looks, for example. You could do a 3D pie chart. Looks about the same. Or you could do a ring chart, or call it a donut chart. So we'll just stick with the regular pie chart, but we can see our different bins here. So we have this much of the pie in orange, 35.2% got between 80 and 100, 55.6% of students got between 60 and 80, and we can see all these different charts here. This is missing nice titles, axes, labels, and all that stuff. And something just kind of disappeared on me there. There we go. So all those still need to be added in. This is just showing you how to get everything into the chart, but you do need to make sure that all of your labels and titles are proper. Okay, so that's where this video will end off today. For your data project, you will need to analyze each single variable separately. So that means getting some of this information about mean, median, mode, min, quartile 1, quartile 3, maximum, having some things like a box and whisker plot or a candlestick chart and a histogram are nice visuals to help with your analysis. So I hope you find these things useful and a good refresher for how to get these things into your project.